This episode is brought to you by Kavanaugh's Grill, one of my favorite places to eat and drink in any PA. They've got one of the best outdoor patios with 13 TVs and over 20 beers on tap. You can also dine inside at this cozy Irish-style pub where your beer never goes empty. Did I mention how delicious their food is? Their in-house smoked brisket, barbecue ribs, and wings are to die for. So grab your friends and have a drink on me at Kavanaugh's. Mention code STACKS for one free draft beer with purchase of any entree when you dine in. Located at 163 North Main Street in Mountaintop, Kavanaugh's is open at 4 p.m. during the week and 12 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday during football season. Dine in today at Mountaintop's only Irish-style pub. This episode is brought to you by the Pest Rangers. Finding insects in your home can be a real pest. I know I felt that way when I discovered termites living rent-free in my house. But thanks to the team at the Pest Rangers, I'm no longer bugging out over this issue. So if any creepy crawlers are cramping your style, there's no ifs, ands, or bugs about it. You gotta call the Pest Rangers. For more information on how to rid your home from unwanted pests, call the Pest Rangers today at 570-826-1114 or visit them online at thepestrangers.com. This episode is brought to you by Burn, the fitness company behind the Today Show approved Burn Board. If I'm being honest, working out can be a real chore, especially as a new dad in desperate need of sleep and cardio. Burn is founded by NEPA native Jimmy T. Martin, and his Burn Board offers a low-impact core and cardio experience unlike anything I've done before. They have hundreds of on-demand workouts that are great for beginners, seasoned athletes, and out-of-shape podcast hosts who love supporting small businesses. My wife and I use it pretty frequently throughout the week, and it's honestly a great way to burn a ton of calories without burning a ton of cash. Not to mention, it's a great tool for skiers, runners, wrestlers, and hockey players. Jimmy is offering all On the Stacks listeners 15% off when they use the code STACKS15. Visit theburn.com today to get 15% off your purchase with code STACKS15 at checkout. Again, that's theburn, THEBRRN.com to get 15% off your purchase with code STACKS15. It's time to get on board today with Burn.
You're gonna fall over, and like a turtle, when you put a turtle on its back, it doesn't know how to get back up. I said, well, someone's gonna help you get righted, and they're out there for you in your life, and it's important for you to realize that, because you will meet a wall, you will meet an obstacle, you are gonna meet that person that's not gonna approve of you, but you have to learn to kind of work with it and have the faith in yourself to work through it.
Oh yeah, whoa. Look, they can never keep me down, I'm going. And if I ever fail, just know I'll go again. I never quit, cause I know that every loss may lead to another win. I'm going up.
Hi, I'm Bill Corcoran Jr. This is the On the Stacks podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Fred Aebli, aka Mr. Fred, the creator of Getmecoding Com. What's up, podcast? It's Bill Corcoran Jr., host of the On the Stacks podcast, coming to you from the Blue Door studio, protected by our friends at Ritchie Security Solutions. Mr. Fred, welcome to the show.
It is great to be here. I'm finally glad we're here. We were talking, and it's going to be a fun talk, I think, altogether.
Absolutely. So, all right. So, first question is, Mr. Fred, why do people call you Mr. Fred?
Well, it's not because the name is too long. Right, it's only a couple of letters, but it's because it's so hard to pronounce. Aebli, Aboli. It's been said and butchered so many times. So after a while, when you meet new students, you really want to make sure they're comfortable with you. And the last, you don't want them to struggle with your name. So I just shorten it up and just go with Mr. Fred, and that's how everybody gets my attention. And the
correct pronunciation is
Aebli.
So Fred Aebli.
That's my name.
That's it. Shortened to Mr. Fred.
It was the best thing to do. And I know there are longer names out there.
Yeah.
I've seen longer names. I'm part Polish, so I get the deal,
Yeah.
And Mr. Fred was the best way to, boil it all down.
Yeah. So I'm also really excited because I love, you're a Penn Stater.
Yes, I am.
As am I, which I know a lot of people know that about me, but I always enjoy just having a conversation with another Penn Stater, because as you know, and I'm sure every other Penn Stater knows, there's something about, when you meet another Penn Stater, even if you don't know them, and Fred and I don't really know each other other than just having one phone conversation before coming and doing the show.
Right.
But there's just something about connecting with another Penn Stater that there's just that unique and instant just relationship that's formed.
Yes.
And I don't know what it is.
It's the shared experience. I think that's what it is. Like, whether you were, at a campus location or at the University Park location, there's a lot of commonality in there. Whether it's understanding the blue and white or the Nittany Lion or the creamery or the football field or that English professor that we had that's still there, you kind of have that bond. And that's such a great thing to work from, right? It's having that understand. And it's also like in a weird way, like the trial. Like you went through that, I went through that, or that was crazy, wasn't it? Yeah, it was crazy. But I think it's just a neat way to start off a conversation and kind of go from there.
It's just that instant ability to just relate.
Yeah.
Like we have because we it's almost like we came from the same place.
Exactly.
In a sense.
And there's certain things too. We were just talking about this not too long ago. Like there's I don't know if you want to say it, things haven't changed, but they've changed.
Yeah.
And it's that shared history. It's that all that pieces together, and it just creates that bond. Yeah.
It does.
It's good stuff.
So yeah, I thoroughly enjoy having other Penn Staters on the show because I feel like we can make a whole show just about Penn State. We won't do that. We won't do that to the people.
Yes, we could. Yeah, you could.
But we can go probably just go down a rabbit hole and have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah.
So
it's good stuff.
But yeah, like I said, I'm like super excited to have you here, and you brought some robots with you, and some other really cool techie stuff. So for all the techie people out there, they can learn a little bit about what you do, and but where does the tech stuff? Where did it start for you? Like when did you like get into this type of stuff?
I love telling this story. I share the story a lot too. I get asked to speak to students, middle school primarily, high school, and of course with my students that I have. And I like to share it because I think it gives a little bit of insight that everybody can have a similar story. My story starts though back in 1977. So, and not to start off on a down note, but it was the same year my dad passed away. So the same year my dad passed away, a movie came out called Star Wars. So here I am, 9 years old. My mom learns from the story of Star Wars from my uncle who was out in Arizona, and he called up my mom and he's like, "Rosalie, you got to take your son, take Freddie to go see," and that's also I'm known as Freddie.
Freddie, okay, hi, Mr. Fred and Freddie.
Right. So she's like, "Take Freddie to see Star Wars," and I can remember going to a supermarket in Southside in Scranton and seeing one of those cardboard marquees. And the books, holding the books, and it says Star Wars. And my mind was like, what's that about? Wars and stars and stuff like that. I really had no idea. Merv Griffin was still on at the time, the talk show, and it would be on in the afternoon or whatever. And I can remember one of the characters, I think it was Mark Hamill might have been on that episode. Anyway, they were talking about it. So you could see the hype was building and something different was happening. So that came out in May. And then my dad unfortunately passed away in July. I saw it later that summer. And from that moment on, when the Imperial Star Destroyer comes out of the screen, like careening, we never seen anything like that before. It was loud, it was booming, and immediately I was catapulted into something else. So here I was, 9 years old. I'm an only child, me and my mom. Now my mom's one of 12. So I have tons of cousins.
Big family.
Big family. But still, like, I think when I look back at it now, I just wanted to get away. And Star Wars started to give me this pathway to say there's something else out there, even though it was all science fiction. And so I bought into it. And so, of course, 9 years old, kid, the next thing you're wanting the toys. The toys didn't come out that first Christmas. Everybody was bummed out. There was the mail-in package, which I mailed in. I got the first 4 figures, R2-D2, Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca, Princess Leia. And, you got them in this cardboard, nondescript box.
Do you still have them?
Sadly, I sold them.
Oh.
And
They'd probably be worth $1 bazillion.
Well, yeah. So Luke Skywalker, this is the Luke Skywalker that had the lightsaber that slid out, right? But then it slid out further. So everybody had the one where it just slid out a little ways. Then all of a sudden you extended it. That went for $3,000 at the time.
Oh, wow.
I didn't get $3,000 for that. But I got a lot of money and I sold them. And I sold... So I have 3 children, and one of them, was my son. My other 2 are daughters. And I'm thinking, Star Wars, they're not going to be interested in Star Wars. Because that was like in that lull period. And that's when I kind of offloaded some of my quote unquote collector's items. So I had the toys. I got into it. I sold some of them, but I still have a lot of good classical stuff. But as that movie kind of came out, it also got me interested in space.
On the Stacks will be back in a flash after a word from our sponsor.
If a son or a daughter of a mom or dad that thinks there's been nursing home neglect, you're not wrong to think it. So the first thing I would do, if you're in that position, is to go right to the nursing home and ask to speak to the director of nursing to report what you believe to be nursing home neglect. The Department of Health will actually come in and do an inspection on the premises and cite the nursing home for whatever the potential neglect is. And then, if more things happen along this spectrum, and now you're in front of a lawyer and you're saying, my mom's been the victim of nursing home neglect, well, now we have something to work with, and that's the Department of Health citations and the fact that you've notified the director of nursing. So they can't really hide from the neglect that's been out there for the last several months or several weeks.
And now, back to our chat on the Stacks.
Now you're talking late 70s, early 80s.
So you're like 9, 10, 11, 12.
Correct.
Right?
And you're starting to learn about the space shuttle. So, this is now well after the Apollo program, the landing on the moon, Soyuz, Apollo missions, the space station link up and all that. This is now getting into this new era, and I was like fascinated by that. Fortunately, I hung around with some guys that were also kind of like these tinkerers. Like they were Star Trek guys, though, which I don't hold against them, but they were Star Trek guys, and they would always invite us in. Like, we were the younger kids, and they would always be doing stuff with electronics. There was a Radio Shack down the road, we go to Radio Shack. Now, you could easily say, well, they must have been geeky guys. No, the one guy grows up to be one of the premier fighter pilots in the Marine Corps, almost became a one-star general from Scranton. And another guy who was into biomed technology, has patents on assistive devices, and we're still friends. We all still stay in touch with each other. But like, that's what it inspired me. So I would see all this stuff happening, and not so much happening, but yeah, you could build this, you could do this, you could figure out that, you can go there. So as my story kind of progressed, it's like Star Wars brought me in. I'm seeing like space exploration happen again through the space shuttle program. I write to NASA or something. I don't even know who I wrote to, but I got an autographed picture of, was it Crippen and Young, who were the space shuttle pilots at the time who landed the first space shuttle. It was like a test flight. And I got an autographed picture. Like, all this stuff is like building into my psyche now, and it was one of those things where I'm like, wow, I'm being recognized. I got a signed picture.
Yeah.
So I continue to look at it. My mom worked for a data entry company in Scranton, Walsh Associates. So Mr. Walsh, if you're listening to this out there, and your family and their business had such an impact on me. So they had a fellow there who was a software programmer. So they did data entry. It was a real cool story with that business. I believe the way the story goes is they had a contract to do data entry for an insurance company. They would do all the data entry here in Scranton. They had a team and they were women. I don't mean to sound sexist, but my mom was one of these supervisors, and they were typing in the data. They would get the paper form, type it in, and there was a guy that wrote software that captured that data. They would store it on reel-to-reel tapes, not discs or anything like that, and they would cart it down to Camp Hill, and then Camp Hill would upload all that data. So he had heard that I was into computers and science, and it's like all this science fiction stuff. So he gave me a programming book called Basic. And I'm like, well, it's Basic. I didn't know what it was. So I had that. Now, at that time, now I'm getting older, and one of the things I give my mom credit for, and this is the big thing I always like to tell moms and dads, like, you have such a significant impact on your children in many ways that you don't even really know. Like, everybody thinks that they're influencing their kids and they're putting them on these paths, but it's the little things that you could do as a parent. My mom was really good at always placing some kind of technology in front of me. She never forced it down my throat. I just kind of discovered it, and I would always play with it. So my first computer was a Timex Sinclair 1000. And it was this, if you Google it, you can see it. It's this, little black box, and it's membrane keyboard, whopping 16K of RAM. It was like K, not gigabytes.
Yeah, wow.
And
very slow.
Right. And so all of a sudden I would find myself kind of like teaching myself programming. And then my next computer was a Commodore 64. The story that I always tell about my Commodore 64, this is going to sound terrible. I'll share this. Why not? I knew there was a Christmas gift wrapped in my mom's bedroom, and my mom worked second shift. So I'm home, that night taking care of myself. She would go into work. I'd be there, and I snuck in and I pulled out the wrapped gift.
I see where this is going.
I unwrapped it. I took the Commodore 64 out. I plugged it in, and I started to use it. And before she would come home, I would put it back in the box. I would rewrap it and put it back in the box.
How old were you?
I think at that point, I might have been a freshman in high school.
Okay. Yeah, so you had some decent wrapping skills, obviously.
Right. So I was starting to learn all that, and then so obviously I got the gift, and one of the neat things that came out of that, I'm a Dungeons and Dragons guy, and one of the fellows I was good friends with in high school, we played Dungeons and Dragons, and we said one day, why don't we make a game? And we both knew a little bit of basic programming, so we sat down and we basically at that time, no pun intended, we created a scripted game. If this happens, then do this. If this happens, if you encounter that, do this. And it was this long script. It was a lot of Saturday morning meeting up at my house where we had our Commodore 64 connected to a black and white television, because that's the monitor. And we would be typing the game, and that's what we did. And we made our own game. I mean, it wasn't a great game. You can,
But you actually made something.
Well, we made the game, yeah. And of course now, as high school is, right? You grow up and you start doing other things. And I always had that element. I liked it. The internet was a dial-up thing. CompuServe, right? You dialed into CompuServe. What was on the internet then? I don't really know. I thought I was kind of tapping into the secret of the universe, and really it was just like a bulletin board, with some limited information. There was no graphics, there was no audio, there was no video, but you were actually doing something that nobody else knew about. And so I think that's another cool thing about it. It was the mystique. There was a tech element, there was the pop culture element, there was the mystique and the tinkering, like all that together was this, I guess, cauldron of interactivity going on, and that's what really kind of kept me going for that. So I was never great at math, and that's what computer science people everyone was always saying, you need to be good at math, Well, I went to Scranton Central. I had an outstanding senior year calculus teacher, Judy Gruen, so she's out there listening. Hi, Judy. And something happened in that class. It just clicked. I just started to get it. And all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I'm going to study computer science. So I applied to 2 schools. There was only 2.
Just 2.
Just 2. Penn State, because I bled blue and white, because my family took me to Penn State football games starting in 8th grade. So you had to go to play at Penn State.
You grew up with it.
So you have to go into it.
Yeah.
And then Embry-Riddle, because Embry-Riddle had an actual program where they would prepare you to be an astronaut. Because that's what I was starting to think.
So yes, you wanted to get to space.
Yeah, so I wanted to be an astronaut. And so I'm putting these pieces together now. I have to get a technical degree, and then I have to go and be in the military, because that's how you became an astronaut at the time. Crippen and Young were test pilots, like all the other astronauts prior to that. The only way you could be a test pilot, though, was if you were in the military, right? So I applied, I looked at the Air Force, and I looked at their scholarships, senior high school. I'm like, I got to get a scholarship. And I started to look at that, and I talked to the Air Force recruiter, and this is by no means any negative comment towards our Air Force veterans out there, but he totally turned me off. He's like, I was out in a missile silo, and I found a new religion out there. It's going to be good for you. And I'm like, I don't need a new religion. Yeah. I said, I just want to go into space,
right, Yeah.
So one evening, my mom's good friend called up and said, why don't you come on over for a cookout? My son's going to be coming in. And turns out her son was a Marine Corps pilot, jet pilot. And he was in charge of the Tri-State Recruiting District. So we go over there, and he was funny. He was from West Scranton, and Mike Durchak. Mike out there, he's still out there, Mike. So Mike, I'm gonna imitate you, and don't be offended. He's like, hey Fred, I heard you like to fly, or you want to fly, and you want to be in jets. I'm like, he's talking like he's from some southern area, and I'm like, yeah. And I remember many years later, he just threw this out to me, and he said, I never thought you would do it. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, I knew I was telling you about it, and you looked like you were excited, but I didn't think you'd do it. So he told me about the Marine Corps, their officer program called PLC, Platoon Leader Class. And I applied. So the way that program works, it's not ROTC. You go for 2 6-week summer increments. Your junior year usually, or your sophomore year usually in your junior year. And while you're there, you go through officer candidate school. It's not boot camp, and there's no commitment. That's the one thing that's interesting about it, is you can go to these 2 exclusive fitness camps. And then your senior year of college, you decide. So we were talking about it, and he knew I was applying. I didn't go to Embry-Riddle. I went to Penn State, and I studied computer science. I started off with a class of 35. I think we ended up seeing it get whittled down to about 10, and we kind of continued through it. I was really kind of bummed out because the other thing that was motivating me to study computers also was video games. So I'm an Atari 2600 kid. I'm an 8-bit graphic guy. I'm 3 lives and out. I'm not a Call of Duty, play for 18 hours, that type. I mean, I do like the games, but so I wasn't really intrigued by the graphics and all that. But Penn State, see, their computer science degree at the time was really to create you as a systems analyst, heavy math, heavy systems development. So, that's where I went. I went to Penn State. I went to Penn State Scranton, or actually at the time Worthington Scranton, and I studied under Richard Dempsey. God rest his soul. He was we talk about him later, but such a great mentor in my life. So I was studying all that. But I wanted to make graphics. I wanted to make video games. But we didn't have access to that kind of technology then. Graphics were kind of like a side distraction for the computer science folks. There were definitely people doing some cool stuff in the 80s. So I'm in Penn State studying computer science, struggling. It was hard. And then also getting ready to do the Marine Corps thing. So my goal was to, still get that astronaut thing. I wore glasses, and I learned that, well, you have to have 20/20 vision at that time. And then they said, well, it could be 20/20 correctable, but after you get your wings. I'm like, oh, so how do I get my wings? Well, you don't. I'm like, well, can I still get it in the aircraft? And that's when I found out you could be an NFO, Naval Flight Officer. That's in the backseat guy, the Weapons Systems Officer, the WISO. So I'm like, okay, all right, good. I can do that. I can figure all this out as I go along. So I'm going, I'm going through college, and I'm studying this stuff, and I'm thinking I have this plan, and that's what it always is, right? I have this plan, and it's a very straight line.
Did you think you had a plan, or did you have a plan?
I don't think I had a plan. I think I was thinking that this is how it's going to be. I have to stay on this thing, but there's a lot of distractions, and the courses were hard. And then I go to officer candidate school. I was the youngest guy in my platoon, one of the smallest guys in my platoon, and all of a sudden I'm like, this is really hard, Yeah. And I'm slowly starting to see this dream kind of get further and further away, And so I go through officer candidate school. I ended up graduating near the top of my class. And it's interesting. It's interesting what you learn you could do, no matter how big or small you are, how fast or strong. It's all in the heart. And so I graduated, and then I finished that first phase of it, and then I'm coming back into school, and I'm continuing to fiddle around with tech, trying to learn computer science, and then as we get into the senior year, now I go to the second phase of the platoon leader class. I complete it. It was really hard. It's designed. We can talk about that later if you want, but it's designed to, simulate combat stress, which really you can't. But what you could do is you could sleep deprive people all day long, and that's what they do. 4 hours of sleep, running, physical fitness type stuff. So I get to my senior year, and I'm going to graduate, and I'm, basically going to graduate on time. And then senior year, I turned 21. And while I come home, I was seeing a young lady at the time, and my friends and we said, well, why don't we celebrate New Year's Eve at the Woodlands down in Wilkes-Barre, big dance party place, right? So New Year's Eve comes along, and we're going out. We just get there, get out on the dance floor. I bust my best, whitey guy move, and I slip and fall, and on the floor, standing upright, broken in half, was a Heineken bottle, and my right hand goes down into the bottle and basically cuts off my finger.
Oh my God.
So there's the hook.
Wow.
Showing people there. But what ended up happening was, so I was supposed to graduate, get commissioned, then eventually get into the aviation side of the Marine Corps and apply for the astronaut program, and then go out in outer space. That was the goal. Now all of a sudden
you're going to Mars.
No, right. So all of a sudden, and now my hand is being wrapped, and I'm being carted off to Wilkes-Barre General Hospital, New Year's Eve.
Oh my God.
Nobody knew where I went. Nobody knew. None of your friends. None of my friends knew where I went.
So wait, did they see this happen?
No. Well, the one person did. And somebody came in from the side. They grabbed me by the hand. They wrapped my hand. And it was a white linen cloth. And they're like, you gotta go. And you know, there's one other aspect of this story. When I bounced back up, and the blood kind of like squirted on the back of this guy. There's like some older guy. Well, he'd be my age now. And he had a tweed jacket on. I can only imagine when he got home, he saw this stuff squirting on the back of his jacket. So anyway, you know, all of a sudden I have to have hand surgeries and you got to come out of school. And I'm like, oh, I have to disenroll. If I disenroll from school, that means it takes me out of the officer program, and then I'm done. Well, I had to get my hand surgery done. They had to reconnect the tendons, the nerves had to grow back. You know, it was I'm a righty. It was my right hand. They had to have a second surgery because the adhesions adhere to the tendon sheath, I guess. And all of a sudden, it was crazy. It was like a crazy thing. So now I'm home, senior of college, with a big cast on my hand, driving my mom nuts because, oh, my dream is over. You know, I look at a giant Flintstone golf club for an arm right there for a second. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Surgeries happen. Now I have to go through hand therapy, strengthen my right hand again. Luckily, I didn't play the piano, right? Because it was a little difficult. And then came, all right, we got to get back into school. Got to finish because I had one semester left. And all of a sudden, one semester left, but now I'm out of the, when I disenrolled from the university to take the time off, the Marine Corps said, nope, you're done. You disqualified from your program. The only way you can come back in is if you sign an agreement to redo officer candidate school, but do it for 10 weeks. So I don't know if any of you have, like, listening to this, have been in the military, you know, you went through boot camp or you went through officer candidate school, you know, you don't want to go back. I literally signed the paper saying, I will do it all over again.
Wow.
And it was one of those moments where I'm like, I gotta do it. I have to do this. This is what I got to do. But one of the things that was interesting about that was I had to meet before one of the officers who would sign off on that. And I drove to State College. He was down in State College at the time. He was visiting. And he pulled me in this back room of this restaurant. And he said, well, we need to talk. And I said, okay, sir. He goes, I'm not going to endorse you. Because you're an alcoholic. He goes, we don't need any more alcoholics in the Marine Corps. And I'm, you know, like, what do you say? You can't, I'm not going to say, no, you're wrong. You know, I'm not going to get into his face because he's going to sign my endorsement. But it was at that moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, my dream is over now. And the way he looked at it was, this is a real interesting time in the Marine Corps and in the military. There was a lot of incidences that were happening where they were either alcohol related or there was, you know, all kinds of bad stuff. And so they were really trying to figure out how do they control the culture. And the last thing they wanted to do was see some guy who cut off his finger at a bar, which looks like on paper a barroom fight or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I let it go. Came back home, tell my mom I'm all upset, you know, and I'm like, what am I going to do? It's over. You know, she was so supportive, but she was upset too. But she never really showed that side of it, but I know she was worried. And so now we're going through the rest of that semester, going to graduate. And then all of a sudden, I get a letter. Fred, your appeal has been heard, because I still sent the paperwork in without the endorsement, and you're in. I'm like, well, la-di-da, I'm in. I am in. So I get commissioned. So I graduated from Penn State, computer science math degree. I then go on active duty for the Marine Corps. So all Marine Corps officers go to Quantico, Virginia. And while they're there, they have to compete for 6 months. It's like kind of like a college of the Marine Corps. It's everybody coming out of the service academies, like the Naval Academy and the other colleges. So you're there for 6 months and you learn all the real details of leading and you know, infantry tactics and so on. So while you're there, you compete for your actual chosen field. Well, I found out there were 5 positions available, one for the backseater, what I wanted. I'm like, awesome. So there were 5 spots. We're about 4 months in. I found out I had the 3rd spot. I'm like, awesome. We're going to do it. About a month before we graduated, they come out with revised numbers and they tell us there is only going to take 2. I was the 3rd and I was cut. I'm like, oh, here we go again. I'm out, kicked to the curb again. So we're at this mixer, a social mixer, kind of like a career social mixer. Yeah, they have them in the military. Right? And I was out there. We have our name tags on. Aebli on my car. And this colonel walks over to me. And nowhere to lie. His name was Clink. Colonel Clink. So if you know Hogan's Heroes lineage, Colonel Clink was one of the main characters.
Clink.
Colonel Clink. He walks over to me, and he was a tall dude too. And he walks over and he goes, Aebli. Yes, sir. He goes, Fred? I said, yes, sir. Scranton, Pennsylvania? I said, yes, sir. Huh. Can I see your hand? And I held up my hand that was injured. He goes, yep, you're the one. And I said, sir? He goes, I want you to do me a favor. When you go back to your barrack room tonight, I want you to call your mother and you tell her thank you very much, because it was her letter that she wrote to the board that got us to agree and sign off on you to come into the Marine Corps. And I didn't know about it. I was floored because I'm like, oh, it was all on me. I'm the guy, like I don't need your help, And I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, he's right. And he, at that point, he said, how did you figure this out? Because you want to be into this wing side and all that. We had a great conversation. Long story short, I called my mom. I said, Mom, did you write a letter to the board? She goes, oh yeah, that thing, I forgot about that. I'm like, well, it made a difference.
It worked.
It worked. And she's like, she downplayed it completely. So now all of a sudden I'm on active duty. And when you hit the fleet, they call it, I'm in the fleet. I'm doing some IT system stuff. I'm doing aviation stuff. I'm not flying, but I am supporting the aircraft. And naval message traffic comes out, and they're doing a call for astronaut applications. I'm like, ooh, finally.
Here it is.
I put in the application, and I got denied. And it was one of those moments, because I got denied because I didn't have the letters at the end of my name. PhDs. At that time, like the Astronaut Corps was very, very exclusive. They wanted specific educational requirements, and they really wanted the stack, like PhDs, MBAs, higher end science degrees, advanced science degrees. I just didn't have that yet. I mean, I just got out of Penn State. I'm not going back to school anytime soon. But the reason why I share that story that way, and that's the story that I tell with when I kind of like elongate it a little bit, but I always like kids to know that you're gonna fall over, and like a turtle, when you put a turtle on its back, it doesn't know how to get back up. I said, well, someone's gonna help you get righted, and they're out there for you in your life, and it's important for you to realize that, because you will meet a wall, you will meet an obstacle, you are going to meet that person that's not going to approve of you. But you have to learn to kind of work with it and have the faith in yourself to work through it. And that's what I think is important for my story. Like, I like kids to hear that. And maybe they do get to hear it in other ways from other avenues, but I think that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you hit a lot of obstacles.
Yeah.
You hit a lot of obstacles.
And it was one of those things where, there were times when I thought it was over. Like, you really do. It's easy to say, oh, it's over. Life is against me.
Yeah.
And
what made you keep going, though?
That's a great question. I do have a faith. I do believe in God, and I am a Christian. I'm a Catholic. But I think it was just, I didn't like letting myself down. I didn't like letting my mom down. And I felt like that was my responsibility. And that's the other thing I like my students to have, a personal accountability. Pride, that's still good stuff. And somehow I think it feels watered down these days. It's okay to be proud of yourself, and to work through that. And that, most importantly, is to work through the challenges, because everything we do has a challenge, right? And when you work through it, it levels you up, using a gaming pun.
I like that. Yeah. No, it's crazy. And right before we started recording, we were kind of talking about this in a sense. And I showed you a photo, because we're in the new Blue Door studio here, and this is only the second episode,
which is a great space.
Thank you. Yeah, this is only the second episode in this new space. And before we started, I was, we were just kind of talking about this, and you were asking me about the beginnings, and I showed you that picture of the original studio,
yeah.
where I was for the last couple years, and how like embarrassing was that right?
It's like you said, it's an illusion in a way. You got the work done there.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
But now you're in this space. This is even going to be better.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's kind of the same thing. Like you said, like we talked about, like those obstacles. I mean, I probably hit a bazillion obstacles.
Yeah.
I was telling you when I started this show, this podcast started like 3 or 4 weeks before the 2020 shutdown. I could have just, after 3 or 4 weeks, I could have bagged it. I could have bagged it.
Yeah, and that's that grit. That's that persistence. Those are hallmark characteristics of all entrepreneurs, right? And that's what you want to have, and that's what we need to be instilling in kids, like whether it's through sports, I guess, or more importantly through academics. That there's challenges and there's hard problems, and we need smart people to work the hard problems, because there's some hard problems out there, and whether they're technology or social or whatever. But you're right, like you have to work and aspire, and that's okay, and it's a good thing. So,
yeah. So do you think, I mean, going back a little bit, to when you were a lot younger and you lost your dad so young, did that have any impact or influence on a motivating factor for you throughout your life and career?
Yeah, I think it did. I think so. First of all, I was blessed to be raised by so many people. I have so many great family members and friends. I don't know. I have a great friend, several actually, and we're all still friends. One of them goes back to kindergarten. My buddy Mark and my buddy Jeff and my other buddy Ron, like we all go back to, some of them are high school, but middle school and elementary school. So like I've always had good people around me, but for my dad, I think it was one of those things where you start to wonder what's going to happen to me. And if I don't own it, what'll really happen to me? And that's where I had to learn at a young age. Like I made a lot of mistakes. There's no doubt I got into enough trouble with things, but it was always where if I don't figure this out, this is it. Like I used to think about that sometimes. Like if I lose my mom, what am I going to do? Like if she dies, like where am I going to go? You really do. You realize quickly. And I know that my one friend would always say, Fred, you had to grow up early, but I didn't feel that though. Like, Fred, you have to cut the grass. Well, I would be cutting the grass while my other buddies would be out there riding their bikes. I would be, doing something in the house, fixing something in the house in a real trivial kind of, 14-year-old way. But that's what you did, and like I was saying before, my mom worked second shift. I could have easily have become a pretty big problem. Yeah. Mom goes to work at 4:30. Freddie's at home for, from 4:30 till midnight. I could have been out doing some pretty bad stuff.
You could have become a big problem.
Yeah. I said, but I didn't, because I knew, I just knew that I had to be doing this stuff. And I think going back to the tech stuff and the tinkering, that's what I filled a lot of my time with. I was a model train guy. I was a model builder. I was a tinkerer with electronics, teaching myself how to program. I mean, the book that guy gave me, I was saying before, was like a tome. It was like 3 inches thick. And I'm looking at it, trying to figure it out. But you did, it's cool. So yeah. I wonder someday when I meet my father again, I kind of wonder what he'll say. I'm sure it'll be interesting conversation that we could say. He'd be like, you shouldn't have done that, but you did good here. But yeah. And then of course I did lose my mom, at the outset of COVID. So we lost my mom to COVID. She was in a nursing home. We said goodbye to her through a window. Not the way it should have gone, but it's the way that it went. And to this day, my mom and I, commune, through prayer. I see a cardinal and I think, no, she's watching me.
Yeah.
And I could hear her. I could say, Freddie, what? Freddie,
She called you
me Freddie. Yeah. So it was, I was little Freddie. My dad was big Fred. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah. So, all right. So Marine Corps, what came next?
So that was really interesting too. My time on I love the time on the Marine Corps. So this is pre 9/11. So this is an era of, we were really reacting to a lot of things happening around the world. Bosnia, we had the whole genocide happening there. I was part of Operation Deny Flight, flying out of, I wasn't specifically in Aviano, Italy, but we were flying a lot of joint missions out of there. But we had Haiti, we had the AIDS epidemic in Haiti, and then we had Somalia. So my time in the Marine Corps was really all about being part of the support of all these crazy hotspots happening. When 9/11 hit, I had made the choice at that time. Well, let me back up. I was on active duty, and then the internet starts to appear. and I was still eager to get my tech side going more. I went back to school when I was on active duty, and I finished my advanced degree, and this thing called email popped up in our offices. And it was, hey, you could send an electronic message. This is really cool, And we're starting to see tech kind of come to its own. And I was always fascinated. So I was working more technology projects because of my background. I was starting to make, some decisions. Do I want to stay in the Marine Corps? Or do I want to get out and do tech stuff? So this is like 1996. I ended up hooking up with a placement agency. So a lot of military officers get recruited by agencies that then place you into corporations because we're especially big pharma. Big pharma is a bureaucratic type of system. The military is a bureaucratic system. Good fit, that type of thing. But I wanted tech. I wanted to get into tech. So I ended up going and interviewing. I ended up working with a company called Bradley Morris out of Atlanta. And they were putting me in front of all the big names. So I ended up getting an interview with a company called SAIC, Scientific Applications International Corporations in Northern Virginia.
That's a mouthful.
Isn't it? It's like, who would come? Let's just call it SAIC then. Yes, good idea.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was this is early internet. They were attached to DARPANET and ARPANET. So those are the founders and the real foundational people of the internet.
So who is the internet, by the way?
Al Gore. No.
That's right. He is. He invented it, right?
Right. No, the reality is so we did create the internet. The United States did create the internet. And there's a lot of great history on that, packet switching technology, and then ultimately sending the first messages and so on. But a little history, right? The internet has been around since the Eisenhower era. The way the story kind of goes, I think for a little history here to bore our listeners maybe, is if you think about the interstate highway system under the Eisenhower presidency, that interconnection between states. When the Soviets at the time were, sending satellites and then Sputnik goes around the globe, the United States is looking at that going, oh, what if they strap a bomb to that? So all of a sudden the United States think tank kicks into high gear. And they're like, we got to create a redundant communication system in the event that they hit us with something. So they started to look at architecting this communication system over the twisted pair copper that we had all over the country. And that's where really the internet starts to grow. And then we don't really see it in its current form until later into the 70s and then, of course, into the 80s, really. But I ended up, interviewing with the company that was like, they're people. These are the people. These are my people.
Yeah, right. You found the place.
So, and one night I was back. So I was stationed in South Carolina, and I flew up to Northern Virginia for the interview. And then I got a call from the headhunter agency, and they're like, hey, Fred, we want to put you in front of this company called Bell Atlantic. I'm like, Bell Atlantic? I know who they are. They're the phone people. And they said, we'll fly up to Baltimore. And I'm like, oh, I've never been to Baltimore. And so you don't pay for this. This is all in the company that's interviewing their dime. So I got on a plane, flew up to Baltimore, stayed in the Inner Harbor. That's where the office was. I'm like, well, this is a pretty cool town. I was single. Baltimore's a great town for single people. And, it's just dynamic. It's fun. People are paying attention to you. You're important. Well, anyway, they were interviewing a bunch of junior military officers like myself. So I was a very senior captain at the time. And I went up there on the I wasn't going to take the job. I was just going to take the free weekend, because I knew I was going to take the job with SAIC. Well, I get to Bell Atlantic, and it was one of those interviews. I felt like I was with family. It just felt like that. And I was talking to this person and that person. Now all of a sudden I'm flying back to South Carolina, and I'm in the catbird seat. I have two great options because they came out with an offer. And I'm like, do I want to live in Baltimore or do I want to live in Northern Virginia? So I ended up taking Baltimore. I took Bell Atlantic. And when I got there, we were doing early internet dev. Like we were putting databases online, and I was loving it. I mean, Bell Atlantic is one of those companies, Bell Atlantic, one of the baby bells, formerly AT&T, Ma Bell, the internet, really, the other part of the internet. And it was really interesting about that time at Bell Atlantic was they had a CEO there, Ray Smith. And Ray Smith was he was like a politician, businessman kind of guy. He was flying out to the West Coast, talking to all the media people, thinking that the internet would be this great vehicle to serve up media. What a crazy idea that would be, right? Streaming services maybe someday. But we're still at dial-up still. So it's like he had that vision, which was kind of cool. So it was neat to be there, like in this group, kind of talking about these things. Well, then one day, I got a good call from another friend of mine who was also a computer science type. Now, he didn't build a game with me. It was a different guy.
Okay.
He went to Temple. I don't hold that against him. But he went to Temple, and he's like, hey, Fred, you want to move back to Pennsylvania? And I'm like, doing what? He goes, do some work for Oracle, the database company, at the Berwick nuclear plant. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I'd like to come home. I've been away for a while now. Because at that point, I was around 12 years, I think. And I'm like, this would be neat. So I came back. I interviewed with the group. And we weren't in the nuclear reactor. We were in downtown Berwick. But we were in a great setup. There was like 35 of us software types. It was almost like a Silicon Valley setup there, really, when I think about it. And we were making a software application for the nuclear plant. What was really cool about that, my team ended up getting flagged for creating an internet portal because the management heard that they could use this web browser thing if they dialed in and they could pull data into it and they could visualize what's going on in the reactors without having to drive all the way to their office. I'm like, well, how do you like that?
Yeah, it sounds pretty good to me.
Right. So we there was no documentation. There was no instructions. We were building it all from scratch. I loved it. I absolutely loved it because we got to play and tinker. And we were making things that nobody else was doing that I'm aware of at the time. And so I was there for a little while. And that's really what happened was I was building software sitting there in Berwick. And what a great team of people. We're all still great friends. We've all kind of gone off into different directions. The project is still alive. We could talk more about that, but it's like that. It's a new generation of developers taking the application in a totally different, because it was a massive software application. But it was a lot of fun. So that was the next step after that was I left the military. I got into tech. I learned a lot at Bell Atlantic. I learned a tremendous, I had a great mentor, Rick Spence. I don't know where he is today. He'd be in Baltimore. He was a true Baltimorean. He liked to be called that too. And I never knew that. I never knew he liked that. He said, "Yeah, I'm a Baltimorean." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But it was one of those things. Like I've been blessed to have people alongside of me. And I think the other thing too is I without kind of sounding egotistical, I've let them teach me. And that's something too I look for in my students and remind my students. I'm like, be taught, because you're going to be able to give it back again someday. And that's what it is. I can kind of go roll with it. So we did the software work and learned a lot fast, because these are like 75, 80-hour work weeks, right? The learning curve was like straight up, and you're just consuming this stuff. And plus, I just loved it. So it was fun. It was a fun time. It was a real fun time. It was like capturing lightning in a bottle. It seems almost like another life back then in a way, because what ended up happening was I got a, memo from my boss, and he's saying, we're downsizing and you're senior. And, you know how that works. It's like, you're at the top of this pay scale now and you're going to get cut. So I was like, okay, whatever. And then I don't know why I came back home. I was living in Kingston, as we were talking about before. Yeah. And I drove all the way back up to the Penn State Worthington Scranton campus, and I visited Rich Dempsey. My computer science professor was still there. And I went there. His door was open. It was at night. And I walked in, and I'm like, Rich? He goes, Fred, how are you doing? Because this is like, this is 1996, 97, 90, right around there. And we started to talk. He goes, how would you like to teach? I said, I don't know. I mean, I was an officer. We do have to do a lot of impromptu classes. I'm sure I could figure it out. I said, what's the class? He goes, it's advanced PowerPoint. And I looked at him, I said, well, is there such a thing? He goes, yeah. He goes, it's part of our new degree. And we need some
advanced PowerPoint.
Right. And so all of a sudden I go in there and I'm teaching adult learners in the 2-year degree. And I loved it. It was fun. So he then stopped and he said, we have a new degree program coming online. Would you be interested in throwing your hat in the ring? And it was at that moment, I'm like, wow, I have an opportunity to teach here for Penn State.
Kind of going back to what you just said like 2 minutes ago. You said about being a student and learning, and you took that and you were able to learn, and now
give it back.
And now you're giving it back.
And that's what it was. Like I had gathered so much, whether it was military the way the military did it, or, working with Oracle or working with Bell Atlantic. I was gathering all this type of technology knowledge. And that's what this degree was about. So this is now 1999, like 2000, and this is the internet, and there's opportunity, and
It's coming,
and there's people reinventing themselves. There was a lot of people that were in the classrooms in the 2-year program first, and then we went to a 4-year program, and that's where I've been, for a while with that stuff, and then of course we get into all this other stuff, but that's where I found that, when you give of yourself and you're serving others and you're instructing them and you're giving them tools. Not everybody can go along with it. We're not perfect, but I think the one thing that we try to teach people is you teach yourself and you help yourself, because anybody that's in technology knows that you can't sit still, and you got to constantly be trying to do this and do that.
Constantly learning, and failing, and that's the other thing too. That's an important thing. I know we talked about beforehand. Being resilient and failing, learning from your failure, and then moving forward. I don't think we give kids enough latitude in that space anymore, especially K through 12. It's too tight. I don't think we ever have.
I don't think we have ever. I
don't think we ever have.
I don't know where. Maybe it comes out of the home, but even in the home now, I think people are afraid to let their kids fail. I'd much rather see a kid get a B minus or a C than an A. That's not a real A, and we're convincing them that they're something else. And in the meantime, they're not learning the lessons that they need to learn, because the problems are hard. Everything can't be a TikTok video.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of find ourselves trying to entrench them these days. But
yeah. And back to like the failure thing, just like thinking back on it, like, in school, when you fail, it's like you get punished.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's maybe where it's a little bit backwards.
It is.
And I think it's always kind of been backwards. And,
yep.
Not that we should encourage people to fail all the time, but like
to make mistakes.
Because that's how you're going to learn.
Yeah. And that's how the real world is. People make mistakes. Now, yeah, you're right. We're not talking about an F because you didn't want to do the work.
Right.
The failure is you've tried something, but it didn't work out. What do you learn from that? How do you reflect on that? And then how do you kind of move forward? That's the key.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening in a lot of schools. But it also feels like we skipped a beat of a generation of it. And that's where we are right now. It's like I think we have a generation of people who came through these systems, and they want to blame the system because it didn't work for them, or they can't get where they thought they should be. Well, sometimes things are hard, and there's challenges, and we have to be better. We have to support them. It's almost more like a wellness than a tech skill. It's more like a mental wellness or a health.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It is. No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think it really is.
So it was interesting. So that's when, during that time, I had my young kids, and I was always wanting to instill the curiosity factor. I think that's what I had. That you were asking before, what was the other things, like kind of like losing my dad and so on. I think I always was curious. I wasn't like taking apart the phone in the kitchen, and well, maybe once. But I wasn't taking apart anything and not being able to put it together and ruining things. But
right.
I was always curious to know how things were working, and I always wanted to put that in my kids. And you notice that for those who are listening and they have kids, they know that they're all different. When you have 3 kids or 4 kids or 2 kids or 10, they're never all the same. they're just all different. And that's a wonderful thing that I've experienced. That's what my kids have really given me, is the fact that I've learned different personality types, different learning habits and styles. So like when I would say, oh, try this out, they'd be like, I don't want to try it out that way. I want to try it out this way. And like, okay, go for it, But like, I always thought they should be aware of the tech stuff, kind of seeing this and seeing that. My wife is in the healthcare profession, so there's a science element there. She's very good at what she does. But then, the tech stuff, I'm like, oh, you try this, try that. So what that ended up doing was giving me the opportunity to set up some camps, and then eventually moving towards trying to figure out Getmecoding. How could I inspire these kids to be curious? Don't be afraid of this, because it feels like we set the bar real high for a specific group, and that was it. And we realize now we're in an information age economy, and the pool of people that we need to draw from has shrunk. And somehow now we're like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to compete worldwide? And where's the pipeline, when we've did it to ourselves in a way? So then all of a sudden you see STEM, science, technology, engineering, math start up, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So now we're trying to pump up the pipeline and get it back to normal. But in the meantime, like that's where I saw just.
So it dried up.
It feels like it did. So like in the 1980s, if you look at certain trends, computer science grads in the 1980s through 2012 or thereabouts, the numbers decline. Engineers decline. And I don't know why we keep on, changing the formula for K through 12, but something keeps on changing there when higher education really hasn't changed much, because we respond to we respond to corporate America. And then when they tell us what to do, so Getmecoding was created just on my own. I wanted to just get kids curious again, have some fun with this stuff, play, because that's what I did. And I'm not saying I'm the perfect model or anything like that, but I think there's a lot of cool stuff out there that you could just do that stuff.
Yeah.
And you know what? And it's hard for a parent, especially if you're not a techie. Like, where do you start?
Yeah. Where does somebody start?
Yeah. I mean, so
to answer that question.
Yeah. I mean, so where do they start? I think there's two places. It starts in the home. And I think if your child goes to a public school or a private school or cyber, it's also a conversation with them. I think you have every right as a parent, not to tell them what's in the curriculum, but to say, what are you doing in the curriculum? Like, what are you doing about this area? How are we preparing these kids so they can have these skills, or at least have the option to pursue these not so much professions, but to pursue these educational paths if they want to see it go further. Look, every kid shouldn't have to code. I would not expect every kid to code, but they should at least be able to try it. It's no different than every kid. It seems like we put a lot of kids out on the baseball field every spring. Everyone's out there playing t-ball and everybody's out there playing little league baseball, to a point, little league baseball, I guess now. Education should be the same way. We should be getting as many kids on the field as we can. And that means lowering the bar a little bit. Don't worry, the rigor is out there. It's definitely out there. But let's get them through some of those challenges. Let's build up their strength, and let's kind of like let them understand that this is accessible. That's the one thing I love about the stuff that's out there today. It's so accessible. We were talking before, like one of the reasons why I got into this stuff was the Atari 2600 to make video games. There's so many cool things out there now to make games, like to play and to toy around. And who knows what you're going to create? You might create the next greatest dollar app to download, and kind of go that route. So I think that's where they could start. They could start at home. I do Getmecoding.com.
And what is that?
So Getmecoding.com is purely created from that desire to see kids get into coding. Now, so what is coding? That's the question I get. Coding is programming. It's software programming. So we've seen it become coding because that was almost like a marketing switch. It was a moniker that was taken on by some really cool, smart people who recognize the same problem at a national level, and it's been slowly adopted. What you see is coding, software programming, is nothing more than creating the instructions to tell computer hardware what to do. That's what software is. So what they did was they've created a lot of these tools that work in what's known as low code. Low code is block coding. Some people who have been around this industry for a while will look at that and they'll say, that's not really programming. It's logical thinking. It's the step-by-step process that you go through to get an output or an outcome that you want. And that's what these block coding tools do. So yeah, I mean, for a kid to sit down in third or fourth grade or fifth grade or even seventh grade or eighth grade, even high school, and then all of a sudden to tell them, you're going to program in this programming language, and it's text, and it doesn't produce what they expect it to do, you could easily extinguish a kid's desire. Easily. Now, are you going to have your 10%ers? Sure you will. You'll always have these 10% of these kids who that's exactly what they want to do. But it goes back to, once again, of creating a bigger pool. We got to get them the basics built in. And that's what these tools will do. So when you look at some of the toys that we have, like here, that's what it does. It allows the kids to have a tactile connection. They can really like touch something and program it and get it to do something you wanted to do. And so that's where Getmecoding has created its, I'm creating the presence for it to give parents an option to say, this is where we could start. Now, will it get further and further? That's what we hope in the long run. I mean, but I just felt like there was a gap, and there still is a gap. And I think there always will be a gap. And I'm just trying to fill it with just my own energy and my own desire to see kids, learn something, have fun, solve problems. And then the other element too is collaboration. I think that's such an important concept, or not concept, but practice, is good collaboration skills, talking, understanding, listening, probably more important. And then kind of working together to figure out problems, because that's what they're going to be doing. That's what they are. I mean, that's what the world is now, right? Distributed teams wrapped around the globe. And now these kids need to be seeing that now. It's good stuff.
Yeah. All right. So I mean, coding, all of it, to me is kind of foreign. It sounds complicated. You know what I mean? Like, so do you have, through your, it's a program, you have courses. Is that how it works?
Yeah. We've done something where I have a lot of free resources. So if you go out to Getmecoding.com, it's going to link you out to courses.getmecoding.com, where there's a lot of free stuff out there. Oddly enough, one of the most popular things we have out there as a download is the Lego Chicken Challenge. So if you need a team building exercise, the Lego Chicken Challenge is, it's one of those things, like we were saying before, you put something out there, you don't know how people are going to take it. This thing took off, and I'm like, holy cow, it's just it's a fun Lego exercise that facilitates the concepts around a technology project of software development using Legos. So they download that. The other things that are out there that I walk through, there's a lot of resources on the web. And so what I do is I find myself curating that stuff. So I'm helping parents understand where to start. And then when I look at it, I try to boil it down so it's a little bit easier to get in, because there are a lot of resources out there. It's mind-numbing. There's a lot of videos out there, whether they are on TikTok or whether they are on YouTube, or they are actually video tutorials, like connect it right into these. So you have tools like Scratch and Microsoft's Arcade Maker, and then Game Fruit, and there's so many that are out there. But sometimes, once again, you get into them, and if you just launch a kid into them, they have to start figuring it out. That's a good thing, but it's also that thing for some kids, it turns them off. So that's what I try to be, that bridge, like I said, the curation factor, and try to, in my own words and my own energy and my own style and in my own story, say, hey, you could do this. If I could do it, you could do it too.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
If Mr. Fred can do it.
Yeah, right. And that's all it is just trying to get them on that pathway, and then let them play around with it. So there's courses out there. We just switched everything over to a subscription model, and because it allows me to then scale things quicker. And we have some great stuff being queued up that we're going to put out there.
Yeah. What's coming up?
Well, right now we have a full-blown game making course in the subscription. And that is a full extrapolated thing. It's not just, hey, do this, then do that. We talk about the steps you take before to plan your game. So there's that other aspect of learning in there. It's not just, I sit at the computer and I just do this. They develop their own studio in their house. They can download a few signage and so on. But they go through the planning process, some storyboarding, which is a great concept. It's applied in so many disciplines, right, from media to software development. They get into the steps, and also I teach them what are the 5 components of all great games, and I make sure that even if they don't want to use the tool that we're using, if you focus on these 5 concepts, you can build a game. These are the things these are the hallmark elements of all great games. And then, they can kind of go in there and they can build out that game. It's a series of video tutorials. So yeah, there is that little bit of that watch and learn. And then I always give them challenges. Inside of each one of those steps, there's challenges. So what that allows them to do is you can do my canned approach in a way, but then they can take it and they can mod it. So they know what mods are, because they're either doing it in Roblox or they're doing it in Minecraft or something like that. So they can kind of modify that. The other thing that I'm getting ready to weave in is some traditional web stuff. Yeah, even though there's all these great like website builders, the technology that's in there is still important to know. HTML, CSS, some JavaScript. But more importantly, how do you move files? How do you rename files? How do you do file management? Like, these are the things that I see with my older students that are lacking, depending upon what high school they came out of. So like little things like that. And then we're also looking at weaving in some VR stuff. So there are some very accessible platforms that could start to introduce them to how to develop for VR, for virtual reality. Like it or hate it, the metaverse is coming. And I think these kids know it. Now it's a matter of, once again, getting them excited to know that it's not some kind of magic mystery meat. It's how you build stuff. And if they can build some stuff, they could be really having a great future. I know that some people get squeamish when they hear about that term and who's behind it.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to.
But it is real.
It is real. It is real, and I think it's going to complement a lot of the things that we do already. It's not going to replace us, even though we were talking before. It's a great narrative for those science fiction movies, and not everyone's going to be sitting on their couch and staring off into space with their hands dancing around in front of them, But I think there's going to be job opportunities. I think you're going to see certain industries that are going to use it as training platforms. Oh, you will. They're already out there. You're seeing training platforms. There's going to be entertainment. There's going to be educational components to this. So we're going to need people to build this stuff. So every time, we see a new technology rise up, does it take away jobs? As we were talking before, sure it does. But then we create new jobs. And that's the thing that too, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. That comes down to hope. And that's, everybody for some reason, not everybody, a lot of people are just seeing it as this drop off. This is the end.
No, it's the evolution.
It is the evolution. And that's what when we had horses, we moved to cars. And there was all those people who had horses said, this is it. No one's going to, we're all going. Well, we move into this next industry and we move into that industry. And slowly but surely, the monotonous tasks that the human person that you've hired to do does get automated. But then we move on to the next tier of stuff that we have to get done. So that's the thing I always try to express to my students, whether they're through Getmecoding or elsewhere. I'm like, there's hope. You're building stuff. You're making better versions of yourself. Like you're growing. And that's the fun stuff. That's what I love.
Yeah. So, all right. So through Getmecoding.com, like what is the age range of students that you're teaching this to?
I love that question because I do get asked that a lot. And it's funny when I look at some of the demographics, I have a lot of older students. I like to call them seasoned. and there's some people that are in their parents that are in their 40s.
Okay. So this isn't just for kids.
No, they're out there. They want to know what this is about. And that's great. I think that's so important too. If you're going to have your kid jump on the notebook, computer, whatever, and they're going to do this stuff, why not do it with them? There's nothing better. I have a great story of an opportunity where this one dad had two boys. The one boy was super head over heels into sports. He was a phenom. Young, but really good. Loved it. And his dad loved that because his dad was a sports guy. The other son, not so much. Propeller head kid. Kind of like me, like I was. And he just didn't know how to relate to him. And so, he started to do some of the stuff we did through Getmecoding. And his dad was like, well, show me what you did here. And his son would be all excited to show him. Well, anyway, they ended up building something. And the way the story goes is they built this kind of this game, if you will, that was sports oriented. And they uploaded it and shared it with ESPN.com. The ESPN.com blog at the time recognized it. And they gave a shout out to him. And it was one of those moments the sports dad, was super pumped because his geeky tech son,
the propeller head kid,
got noticed on the sports side of things. And I said, that's the beauty of all this stuff. You can easily sit down with these tools and just play with your kids, and you're learning. And what if you do sit down with your kid and they see something and they figure something else out that nobody else has, and all of a sudden that's something that could take off. Like what if they create that fun app or game or something, and that's life-changing.
Yeah, you just don't know what could come of it.
I was thinking, I remember my son one time. I talked to him. I said, his name is Jake, and I'm like, what do you think would be a fun game? I don't know. I'm like, well, what do you like? What's cool? He says, well, this one here, you run your finger up the toilet paper roll, and you have to empty the toilet paper roll of all the paper roll sheets.
yeah.
I'm like, that's brilliant. But it's little things like that. Like, I also love about doing this stuff and working with this stuff is you get to see it through a kid's eyes. I don't know what happens, and I've gotten to know him, and I guess I can call him a friend. Well, no. First of all, my one friend I want to give a shout out to is Lou Mangello with WDW Radio. He's a true entrepreneur at heart, and he hosts this great event called Momentum. It'll be happening in October, but he had a guest speaker a few years ago called Duncan Wardle. Duncan Wardle was the vice president of creativity for Disney, and he's got a lot of great stories in there. But he poses this great question. Like, do you remember when you were a kid? You get at Christmas time, you get this box, you get the toy, and you get the box. You take the toy out of the box, and then you end up playing with the box for the whole morning. And it was that creative thing, right? It's like that desire to make something new. And then something happens as you get older where somebody convinces us that we're not creative. And that's so true. Like, I think I'm incredibly creative, but when I was in school, I could remember being put in that box. Not toy box, but oh no, you're the science kid.
Yeah, so you just gotta do that.
You just do that. Yeah. And you're the art kid, you're the band kid. Oh, you go do that. And I think that has to stop. I think we gotta knock down all those barriers. And that's really what STEAM is about, right? Is allowing that crossover. So, because a lot of people will say, like, what's so creative about writing software? And I said, it's incredibly creative. It's incredibly expressive because you're actually solving problems in the code. And does it look like text? Yeah. Or does it look like blocks? Yeah. But you're ultimately putting it out of your brain. It's a creative element. It's just like painting a picture. It's like drawing a picture. It's like, finger painting. And I think that's what we need to keep doing with the kids.
I agree, because I think even just like society in general, it's like once you gotta grow up.
Yeah.
Right? Quote unquote, grow up, and you gotta stop playing with the toys, or you gotta stop, playing on the computer.
I don't know who made that rule.
I don't know, but I don't like whoever it was.
No, because I think that's the secret.
It hinders so much.
Yes.
In
all levels, right?
Yeah, everyone.
I get it. We all have to grow up and be adults. we have to pay mortgages, buy insurance.
Yeah. But you could still build this stuff. You can still go online, and you can still do all that stuff. Like, why do people discourage that?
I don't know. I think it's starting to change in one regards, but I think it goes back to the home life, and letting your kid like explore this stuff, and also realizing it's not as technical as it might be. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with parents over the years about, how do I control app access or websites and so on, like, because there's a lot of unknowns, and part of the problem is because the tech keeps on changing. And just like those of us in the industry, we have to swim with that very fast current too. And I can understand where parents are a little bit like, oh, I don't know what that is. I don't know how to get into that. And then when their kid has a question, I guess it's deflating to a parent in a way when the kid asks you that tech question and you don't have that answer. And they're looking to you because you're the parent. You're the thing that they look up to.
And all of a sudden, all the answers.
And all of a sudden you're like, I don't know. But the thing is, like, you can help. You can jump in with this stuff, and you should just inspire them and push them along.
Yeah. I want to go back to you. What did you say about like the creativity? Like, it kind of diminished like that creativity, and then you kind of just go the rest of your life without having that creative ability. What were you saying about that? Do you remember exactly what you said?
Yeah, I think what happens is like somebody convinced us.
Right. Okay.
At some point, right?
That's what it is. Yeah.
That you're not creative.
Yeah.
And was that person, first of all, qualified to do that? Well, first of all, it shouldn't be happening. And then why would that ever happen? And we have to stop that. Like, and so what does that mean ultimately? It doesn't mean you like, when I say creative, I think what it means is that everybody has a seat at the table. Like, everybody can contribute to the solution. So when I teach my older students and we talk about design, I want my software developers to understand the artist in the room who's producing the designs, and understand that they go through a creative process too. And when the two of you come together, you build even something greater. I think that's that collaborative thing I was talking about before. I think it comes through collaboration. Play. I just, there's, I don't know what play is it with. Oh, my daughter would be all over me on this. There's a song, I think it's called Play. Saving Neverland.
I don't know. Is it?
Yeah, Kelsey Grammer.
Okay.
He sings it, and I every time I hear that song, and I think of that. They're adults singing the song about play, and once again, we're not talking about going to work and goofing off. It's just having that playful mindset that you're gonna fail, you're gonna fool, you're gonna mess things up, and then you're gonna figure it all out. I don't know, but definitely in my generation, growing up, that was limited. After a while, it was fine. You could play.
Then grow up.
Then you have to grow up.
And the creativity thing just I think it kind of shuts you down as a person, like even, I'll say even a little bit with myself, until I started doing this podcast a few years ago. I think I always kind of thought of myself as like, I'm not a creative person.
No, you're incredibly creative.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just about this, the space is an expressive use of your,
yeah. But up until this point, like and even when I would say that out loud, like people would say, "Oh no, you are," and I was like, "Well, no, I'm not," But also, I don't think I was really doing enough stuff in the world like this, figuring this out and just doing this. I wasn't doing enough stuff to be creative.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And then it's like I just started doing it.
There's so many ways to be expressive, and that's why coming back to this, it's like with coding, it's expressive, it's fun, it's like you're making something. And I mean, there's so many great videos out there. And one of the videos, I can't remember which site it is. It's like you have magic. You're magical. You're making things happen. Through this device. That's so ingrained in our society right now. You can control it. It's not controlling you. But it is. Yeah, there's so many ways, and that's why I love this stuff, and I'm going to keep on doing it until I can't do it anymore.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Awesome. All right, so how can our listeners connect with Getmecoding.com?
I would love them to come out to Getmecoding.com, and the blog posts are out there. There's a lot of free downloads, a bunch of different topics. But if they also come out to that site, they'll be linked out to courses.getmecoding.com, and there's, like I said, you could sign up for a lot of free things that are out there to get you started. And then I would love you to come into the subscription side of the house where you can actually see and interact with me a little bit more. And also you can find me on YouTube. So it's YouTube.com/GetMeCoding. Subscribe. Let me know what you're seeing, what you're liking. I would love to make more of it. That's what I also need to know. Like, what would you like to see more of out there? And so we are on Facebook. Obviously, that's the nature of the beast, and it's facebook.com/GetMeCoding. I'm on the Twitter, but it's not my thing. I mean, I one of the things that I've had a lot of fun with, and this is once it goes back to the creativity.
Yeah.
Instagram intrigues me. Now, I'm not on Instagram scrolling every hour. I'm in and out of there. I love to fiddle around with photos, and I love to do videos and make stuff like that. So you'll see some of that out on the Get Me Coding Instagram page. So it's instagram.com/GetMeCoding. Everything's Get Me Coding.
Get Me Coding.
Can't forget that.
Get Me Coding. Yeah.
And then more importantly, so here we are. I guess when this comes out, it'll be a little bit closer to the holiday gift giving season.
Yeah.
And over the past few years, we've created a STEM STEM coding gift giving guide. And it's what I have seen and reviewed and played with, some of them, a lot of them. And I recommend them for gift giving ideas.
It's your ultimate guide.
Yeah, it's a guide. So it's broken down by ages. I think this year we'll be going kindergarten up, and it's all different coding STEM toys. So if you're looking for that unique gift for a young person, I at least kind of put you in the ballpark. And by all means, if you have questions, I'll do my best to get back. Well, I will get back to you, but I'll do my best to find out, what's the answer to your question if I don't know it. And so what we're getting ready to do is we're going to also launch Getmecodingtoys.com, where everything will be a little bit more centrally located. Because that's what I find. There's a lot of people that want to inspire other young people in their family, aunts and uncles, grandparents, definitely parents. And once again, it's a daunting task. Recommendations and reviews are great on Amazon and some of these other shopping sites. But what I try to look at it from is what software developer for /dad / professor / tinkerer. I try to present it from that perspective, which I feel is unique.
Yeah, you have a world of experience, man.
Yeah, and that's what I've always brought forward. Like I'm a dad / professor. Like I see things from a totally different perspective than some other people, because I have 3 older children. But ultimately with this stuff here, like I have a sense of. It's funny, like when I say I have a sense, it's also the kid in me. Like I'm like, what would I do with this? There was a toy. It just reminded me of something. If we could say one second.
Yeah, go ahead.
If anybody is out there and they remember the Big Track, so if you don't, Google it. The Big Track was this tank kind of thing, space age looking. It had 6 wheels, and on the top it was a keypad, and it had an arrow forward, backward, left, right, and then there was a turning button, and there was a fire button. It had a laser, like choom, 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 choom. And I think about that toy a lot, and I should probably get one. I know they're available somewhere. But it was that logical sequence of steps that you had to program in, and you only got one shot. Like if it got messed up, you had to start all over again. And it was that learning process that I loved, and that's what I look forward in these toys. The toys that let you work through it, and fail. But Big Track, man, that was a great toy.
Big Track. We got to look this up.
Big Track.
Got to get the Big Track.
and it had a little thing you can connect to it too. It had a dumper on it. It was like a dump truck type thing too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was neat.
So everywhere Get Me Coding. Just
everywhere Get Me Coding. And I would love to hear from anybody that goes out to the site and check out the blog. And the other thing too, I'm available to come into schools and speak. As I shared, I'm a veteran. I'm a U.S. military veteran, 12 years. And I would love to make sure also kids hear that story. But if they want to also get some stories about getting excited about tech, I've done that too. I would love to come into the schools. And then if any schools are out there that, I guess, just looking for ideas and some proof of concepts, because like I said, it's a big market too to look at. And I think there's some neat things that are out there that schools should be paying attention to.
Absolutely.
But also the parents that are homeschooling their kids, I would love to be able to continue to help them out. I've helped out a number of parents, once again, curating that market, being available as a guest speaker, and then ultimately just kind of, getting people started.
Yeah, and you got a great YouTube channel, by the way.
Thank you.
Subscribe. Get this guy some subscribers.
Yeah. That's been fun. I've always loved making videos. I've always my wife will always see, like, I'll just watch commercials sometimes because I'm just fascinated by certain placement of certain things. But when I do the video tutorials, I always try to make them fun and interesting. And some people are like, why don't you just get to the point? But I'm like, oh, well, if you want to get to the point, go to the. But I kind of wrap them into different things. And I try to make everything too kid safe, kid friendly, because I don't really know who's going to be watching this, because they're, kids are smart too and they're consuming this stuff. Yeah. And I want to make sure that they're getting it in a way that's appropriate.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun.
I loved it.
Did you?
I did.
Good to be back in person.
This is so cool. This is so cool. This is the way it should be.
Yeah.
I said I've done a lot of interviews, and like I shared with the podcast that I'm with these other teachers on the Teachers Pep Rally podcast.
Yeah.
And we do it via Zoom, which we have to because we have guests too coming in from all over. But the human connection, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah. Plus, you got to bring some of this stuff like physically. I got to actually like play with the robot, and like I got to like physically touch these things, and like you can't do that, on an online, just strictly, virtual podcast.
No. And so I guess if you're watching the video, right?
Yeah.
So there's Marty the Robot. So these are devices that I've been fortunate enough to test out and try out and review. So Marty the Robot is definitely a fun toy that you could program. And what's great about Marty is it is designed to facilitate the learning of coding and programming from the very young age, using colors, all the way up through to high school, where you can, for those that have heard these terms before, they can learn Python or JavaScript. So it's like an all-in-one. And then there's always the ever popular Sphero. These devices are resilient, they're fun, they light up, and they do all kinds of things. And the other ones too that I'm noticing that are gaining some attention are these things called Creation Crate. Creation Crate is a box, it's cardboard, but inside of each one comes all the electronics necessary to build out whatever it is. So the ones we have here is a digital clock and then a weather station. What's neat about that is they're all built around a circuit board known as an Arduino. And right now, the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi, which is I don't want to say it's competition, but it's definitely, I guess it is competition. Very hard to come by. Very hard to come by because of supply chain issues. But the Creation Crate has figured out a way to get these devices in there, and then they're stable as far as bringing them in the classroom. I mean, they're really great things. Once again, it's that hands-on exercise, and you don't need to have prior knowledge with electronics, or you're not soldering, you're not doing any of that. But you get to build it with the electronics, and then you get to program it. And then once you're done with it, you get to do whatever you want with it, and that means you can, further take it into different directions. That's the exploring stuff. So that's just some of the stuff here if you're watching on the video.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Very cool.
Wait,
the Game Boy looking thing.
Yeah. So we have the retro is, it looks like a Game Boy. If you're seeing on the video, it's this little blue box. Microsoft is, so all the major tech, I shouldn't say all the major tech, definitely Microsoft has some quote unquote skin in the game. These tech companies realize they need people. And so they are all looking at ways to get people skilled up. And sometimes it feels a little like they're pigeonholing them, I think, but maybe that's too strong. But Microsoft's Arcade Maker is, it's really a neat low-code tool. So there's Scratch, which a lot of kids already know about. They already experience in school. That's what we built a lot of our stuff out of around Getmecoding. We're going to be adding in more of the Microsoft Arcade Maker. So what's really neat about this little guy is you make it on the website, you connect it through the cable, you push it out here, and now the game is actually running on a handheld device.
So then you can play it.
And then you can play it. And that's an empowering thing for a young person.
It is.
You can imagine, a kid makes his own game using some really good logic skills and a little bit of persistence, figuring out the problems, because it's probably not going to work always the way they want. Then they push it out to this, and it's Thanksgiving dinner. After dinner, the little kid comes out to the grandparents and says to them, "Look what I made." And that's once again, that could be like a life-changing experience for a young person. So it's confidence building. It's fun. It kind of gets them. And if they get bored with it, at least now they know how to do it. And then they move on, and they sometimes come back to it anyway. So it's all good. Yeah. So that's some of the stuff we had here. Right?
Cool. Yeah. A little show and tell.
Yes. I love show and tell.
Yeah. That's what makes this more fun, too.
Next, let's do this again, but we'll bring Star Wars figures.
Okay. There we go. Yeah. All right. Well, again, I appreciate you coming in and sharing all this knowledge, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the things that you got coming up. It's exciting.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to kind of share it with the folks up in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And as always, please reach out to me. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Mr. Fred on the Stacks podcast in the Blue Door Studio. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.
If you want to see more On the Stacks content, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/onthestackspodcast or search the hashtag #OnTheStacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll catch you next time on The Stacks.